Chapter 2, Desperate Voyage. In the pre-dawn darkness of Stillwell's Fisheries dock, a lone whistler warbles the theme song from the movie The High and the Mighty. The melody nearly matches the languid rhythm of waves lapping the shore, which are punctuated by occasional seagull calls. The black and white perception of night emerges into color as the sun breaks the watery horizon and finds Catbait sitting on the Stillwell's Fisheries pier. He's whistling and feeding the bait fish to a pride of cats, which mew and rub against his body. He earned his nickname from the treasured pleasure in the simple life he now leads. John emerges from the house and makes his way next door to the sunny bays at Stillwell Fisheries. Jack catches up. "Hey, Dad, I'd like to come and help." "Sure, son. Extra help's good, even though it might be a little crowded." Rod greets the two at the dock. "John, I feel like we're in this together, all the way. Could I come aboard, Captain?" "Sure, partner." The three climb aboard and turn to find Erric standing on the dock behind them. He's fixed on Jack. John breaks the awkward silence. "Jump aboard, son. We need to get going." Catbait appears and apologizes to John. "Look like the boat's full, man. I'm slow. This old body just get in the way." "Oh well, if that's how you feel, Catbait, we'll be back as quick as we can." Catbait nods his head gravely. The crew gets busy checking fuel, supplies, then cast off lines. John senses something amiss with Catbait, who still stares at him dolefully, his eyes the deepest brown John has ever seen. Catbait intones just above his breath, "Goodbye, John. Love you, man." A warm wave of electricity flows through John's body. He can't decide what it signals, but he rules out fear. He's heard Catbait speak mysteries occasionally. Mamie attributes it to the Holy Spirit. John flows with the feeling. "See ya, my friend." Erric fires up the engine, pulls the craft away from the dock, and throttles up on course for open ocean. John takes a last look to see Catbait still standing, unmoving, and looking at him. Land is nowhere in sight. The sunny bays crawls across a broad expanse of ocean beyond the midway mark between home port and the reefs off Andros Island, a little over 50 nautical miles. The inboard cruises between 7 and 10 knots, pushing the bow through rising swells. White plumes of spray contrast against the navy blue depths of the Gulf Stream. John stands at the bow as if he's scanning the horizon, but he's lost in thought. He likens his mind to jugglers who used to spin a half-dozen china plates balanced on top of sticks on the Ed Sullivan Show. Those performers ran frantically up and down the line to keep the spinning and balancing as the audience watched breathlessly, expecting at any moment the crash of broken ceramic on the stage floor. John prays out loud, "Lord, what do I do right now?" The still small voice answers, and John takes action. He motions to Jack to join him in the wheelhouse. John leans back against the console to face Erric, who's at the helm, and pulls Jack in to form a close circle. "Boys, there's a lot going on. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we will. I'm counting on both of you." John grasps them both in his arms and pulls them in tighter. "I want you to listen good and listen hard." John looks at each son. "Just know I always love you, and I'll never stop, you hear?" John stops, bites his lip, and takes a moment to compose himself as a tear wells in his eye. "You two's brothers, the only ones you got. You got a bad feeling? Just toss it overboard." John levels his gaze until they each return eye contact. "Now shake on it, boys." Erric and Jack solemnly shake hands, and John firmly slaps their backs, perhaps a little harder than is necessary. John looks at Jack. "Far as I'm concerned, all's forgiven." Jack feels a flood of warmth that fights with guilt from the past. He flashes on an image of storm surf battering his boat to pieces on the rocks as he struggles to stay afloat. The bow, painted with the boat name Mamie, is the last to disappear in the frothy sea. John sees Jack's glazed eyes. "Son, what's going on?" Jack comes around. Oh, I have these, they're like nightmares, and I get them in my sleep, too. I guess they're like flashbacks to ugly stuff that happened. Like what? Erric demands. Jack's confused. Hard to, can't do it, man. He rubs his lucky piece of pottery and grips it, hard. Erric turns away to hide his disgust. His heart of stone refuses to give an inch. He opens his mouth to speak, but stops upon discovering a ship on the horizon. Could that be the Bahamians? Captain Clifton Newberry grips the helm of the HMBS Raleigh Gray, one of 4 patrol boats serving the Royal Bahamian Defense Force. His neatly pressed, lightly tinted khaki uniform contrasts sharply against his dark African ebony complexion. Newberry's 6'2" muscular body stands taut, his jaws clenched and eyes intense. Newberry's ship draws close to the sunny bays. He picks up a microphone.
Hail, sunny bays. You have entered the restricted fishing waters of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Heave to for a boarding inspection.
Throttling down his engine, a scowling Erric obliges the demands of the Bahamian captain. No one speaks as Newberry and 2 armed crewmen step aboard the sunny bays. Newberry stands erect, with feet planted apart, looking like an impenetrable wall.
Where are your traps?
None on board, Jack blurts out a shade too defiantly. John and the rest of the crew shoot glances at Jack, while Rod subtly shakes his head, signaling for Jack's silence.
All foreign traps in these waters are property of the Bahamas,
Newberry declares. Jack fumes, taking a couple of steps toward the Bahamians. There are traps, man. The Bahamians shift their hands to their weapons. John reflexively bolts in Jack's direction, trying to head him off from a physical confrontation. The aging man moves quickly at his age, and the rush of adrenaline to protect his son fuels his lightning-like reflex. But he's beyond his own control. John's foot catches the edge of the motor housing, causing him to pitch forward. His forehead crashes into the gunwale, and he heavily falls face down onto the deck. The Bahamians back up. Jack freezes in horror. Rod and Erric rush to John's side. You okay, buddy? Rod inquires as he and Erric roll John over on his back. Jack presses in, kneeling down with Rod and Erric as John speaks languidly. I'm a little dazed. Blood from his head wound flows freely, drooling onto his face. He looks like he was in a bar brawl. Another Bahamian crew member boards the sunny bays with a first aid kit in hand. The Bahamian sailor kneels next to the boys, offering a roll of gauze. Erric nods and unrolls some dressing, applying pressure to John's wound. Blood rapidly soaks the makeshift compress. The brothers flank their father, who groggily asks, Do you boys remember?
Remember what?
They whisper, almost in sync but definitely in confusion. Found you 2 minnows fighting. Jack, you were younger and littler, so I picked you up and pulled you out of the playpen. You know that and made out of leftover traps? Then you stuck out your tongue at your brother. That made Erric so mad that he charged at us, busted through all the wooden slats. The brothers steal a quick glance at each other. The familiar story usually brings smiles and laughter. Today's telling cast a mood of deathly seriousness. Erric, you're brothers. Can't change that. Can't help but love each other in the end. John looks at Jack and then Erric. You hear? The brothers solemnly nod their affirmations to their father as his head wound soaks another wad of gauze and blood oozes onto the deck. John's gaze drifts past the faces of his sons to rest on the boat mast, which is also a simple marine radio antenna. A single metal wire runs from the mast base up and over the end of a cross member, over the mast top, back down over the other end of the cross piece, and finally attaches to the other side of the mast on deck. John's eyes focus on the geometry near the top. Ignoring the wire, he recognizes the shape made by the wooden mast and the right-angle support brace at the top. It's a wooden cross. The white underwater hull paint he slopped on it years ago is cracking and on the verge of peeling. To John's fading eyes, this weathered cross standing high above the deck seems to glow brightly from within. John quietly assures those around him, "It's all right. Just let God rule. It'll be fine." He slowly closes his eyes as if to rest. His face reflects peace. Over the next few moments, his heart slows and finally stops beating. Jack slumps from his kneeling position to sitting back on the deck. Erric crouches with his hand on his father's heart. He stoically rises to his feet, pauses as if seeing his father for the last time, and puts his hand on Rod's shoulder. "He's gone." "What? No! No!" The stunned Jack completely collapses on the deck. Rod straightens up, composes himself, and asks Erric, "Is it okay if I radio the Coast Guard and deal with the Bahamians while you take care of Jack?" Erric nods a grim affirmation. On board the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Intrepid, Captain Robert Pembroke stands at the wheel. His clipped sandy blonde hair complements his reddened, freckled face. At first, conks think his Nordic DNA is out of place in the Florida Keys, but weren't Vikings formidable sailors in ancient times? The radio blares Rod Stillwell's shouted voice.
"The Sunny Bays to U.S. Coast Guard cutter Intrepid. Over."
Pembroke knows Rod's desperate tone of voice might concern their mutual longtime friend, John Thorman. "This is the Intrepid. Go ahead, Sunny Bays. Over." Captain Pembroke scans the horizon and glances at the radar. His first mate closely monitors the screen for signs of the Sunny Bays. Rod lapses into a casual but serious conversational tone.
"Pembroke, that you?"
"Yeah, Stillwell?"
"Sure is, Bob. Sad news. John Thorman died a few minutes ago."
A moment of excruciating silence overtakes the two men. Their private thoughts run in parallel, reinforcing their shared past years. Pembroke struggles through a suddenly husky voice. "I'm very sorry. It's a loss for all of us."
"Yep, it's a shock for us too,"
Rod nearly whispers. Pembroke forces himself back into military mode. "I think it would be a good idea for us to rendezvous. We'll do a basic investigation, officially engage with the Bahamians, and take John to the sheriff's office. The family can follow up. See if that's okay. Over." Rod peers to the horizon. "Will do. I think I've spotted you."
"Yes, we have you on our radar. Out."
Fred Hammond appears on television doing a stand-up on a deck with the open ocean in the background.
The lobster war between Florida lobster fishermen and the Bahamian government heated up today with a human casualty. An accident during a boarding inspection by the Bahamian Coast Guard took the life of John Thorman, a well-respected lobster fisherman in the Florida Keys. He is survived by his wife and 2 sons. There's a memorial service at 10 o'clock a.m. tomorrow. For WTVJ News, this is Fred Hammond.